Hello and welcome to the third and the Don Football Show. I am Joe. With me is Cecil Walker the third, as always, here to talk about some NFL football. The end of the regular season is here. The start of the playoffs is here. Cecil, I'm coming in with two fantasy championships. I'm very, very happy right now. The only thing that can make me happier is a Bengals or Cowboys Super Bowl. I know you feel similarly about one of those things. So, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing all right. I got third place finish in one of our leagues and the fourth in the other. So, a little bit better hopes I had going in the season. But, sometimes you make it in the playoffs. You can't win every year as much as I want to. So, I'm ready for the playoffs, though. This is the best NFL football we're going to get all year.
And Cease, do we have a good playoff setup or what? I mean, this especially this AFC. I mean, we're going to get into the picks here in a little bit, but just so many good quarterbacks. Minus Tua, who's injured. So, but there's so many good matchups, so many good teams, and different teams too. That's not just all the same. So it'll be fun to talk about. But let's start off with our Week 18 recap. We're going to start it off with the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Las Vegas Raiders 31-13. They kept it close for about a quarter. The Raiders did with Jared Stidham at quarterback, and the Chiefs just blew him out of the water after that. They even did their little ring around the rosy play, which they call snow globe, and they were really toying with the Raiders in this game. It seemed like at the end, but they get the win. They get the first overall seed. We know that doesn't mean as much as maybe most years because if they get to the championship game, they do play neutral site, but they at least get the bye. Cease.
Yeah, the Chiefs do. They smash one. Jared Stidham magic only lasted a game and a quarter, and then it fell off. The Chiefs are really cementing themselves with kind of like the super villains in the NFL. They're getting to that kind of level. They're doing toying with opponents, doing like stupid, ridiculous stuff that makes. I mean, it's just trivial stuff, and I don't like the snow globe play. I thought it was kind of weird, and I get it's like, oh look, you can't match up with our guys, but then the play didn't even really work because of the hold. So they can try all this cute stuff, but like at the end of the day, sometimes I feel like the Chiefs spend too much time trying to create some cool new look they think that no one else will ever be able to guess or plan for. And then when it comes to key games and key downs in those games, they can't convert. So it doesn't matter how many cool trick plays you have if you can't convert, the more simple third downs on when you got to have it in the fourth quarter.
Very, very true. Cease, I don't know about you, but I'm still very concerned about this Chiefs team overall. And I mean, they're in one seed; they deserved it. The offense is flowing, but the defense has shown signs of kind of like keeping things close and maybe not being as good as they once were. They try to get a pass rusher at the deadline. So I'm a little concerned about this defense. I don't think this is a typical number one seed where they're unbeatable. I think teams like the Bills and Bengals, and even some of the other teams like the Chargers in the AFC, if they get them on a bad night, I think they could win these games. All right, let's go to the AFC South play-in game. We had the Jacksonville Jaguars and Tennessee Titans. The Jaguars on a tear, and the Titans, conversely, just falling out of whatever momentum they had earlier in the year. Bengals helped start that with their win over them. We had the Jaguars winning this one series 20-16. The Titans start strong, and they give the ball to Derrick Henry enough, 30 carries, 109 yards. But Trevor Lawrence brings him back. I think he is for real. We've seen it for this last 7-8 games that he has really developed into what we thought he would be. And now the Jaguars get their shot. They have a young roster. Doug Peterson, a good coach. So excited for the Jaguars. The Titans are likely going to have to find a lot of new offensive coaches. I believe they already fired offensive coordinator Todd Downing, and for good reason. Kept on taking Derrick Henry out of the game on these third and threes, third and fives, even fourth and fives. I think at one point, really didn't match up really well with if you're. See, what I always say is if your opponent wants you to do something and you do it, which is take Derrick Henry out of the game, you're doing it wrong. So Derrick Henry should have been used more this year. We both know that. We both had him in fantasy, and that's why we maybe so emotionally attached to it. But that was kind of a fatal fall for the Titans, especially down the stretch. And I'm, for one, am kind of glad the Jaguars got in instead of the Titans because I did not want to watch this team in the playoffs.
No, I'm in the same boat there. I'm glad it was the Jaguars over the Titans at the end of the day. I mean, the Titans' defense held up for most of the game. It was kind of a defensive struggle for most of the time. Derrick Henry got his yards. He never got like a really spectacular run for most of the game. There were some quality stiff arms by him that were fun to watch. But other than that, I mean, Josh Dobbs is your starting quarterback in this game. It's hard to imagine that it's going to be much offensive scoring. And the defense, honestly, they didn't get pressure on Trevor Lawrence the way they needed to. And the few times they did, he pretty much got out of there with his legs. And I mean, I think they maybe have had one sack in this entire game on Trevor Lawrence, and that's pretty bad in a gonna have it kind of game, especially with the vaunted kind of Titans defensive front they talk about all the time. I mean, they just got flat out beat. They had the control of the game for most of it, and then the fourth quarter came around, and Trevor Lawrence turned it back on. So they are the AFC South chance for whatever that's worth. Basically, it's worth a home playoff game against a much tougher team, the 5 seed, and we'll see how that shakes out. But if there's one thing, the Titans can take away from all this is that Trevor Lawrence is their guy going forward. And I mean, they got Calvin Ridley waiting in the wings for next year. He's suspended for this year, and they made that before the trade deadline trade here. So it could be a very, very sneaky Jacksonville team that could win this division, perhaps back to back, depending on what happens with the other teams. Because let's be honest, the other 3 teams right now are kind of at a crossroads with what they're doing in the future.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley coming in, you get maybe some more draft picks to help you out. I mean, they've 2 straight first overall draft picks, get them to the playoffs. I mean, I think it's just a huge step forward from what Urban Meyer did with his team. So there's a lot to be very happy about if you're Jaguars fans right now. It just looks like things are an upward trajectory, and that'll be really good for them in the future. Those were the Saturday games, Cecil. Let's go to the Sunday games. We'll start it off with our Cincinnati Bengals at the Baltimore Ravens. The Bengals win 27-16. The game was never really in doubt. The Ravens kind of came back a little bit, but with third stringer Anthony Brown in, it really didn't seem like they'd be able to come all the way back. The Bengals had a hot start, and then they faltered in the second half. That's kind of kept with their theme all year, where they'll play one great half and one not so great half, whether it's first or second half, and that is something that I hope gets cleaned up for the playoffs. But the main story of this game, I think, came down to the Ravens maybe resting some of their starters. And they were down to the third-string quarterback. J.K. Dobbins did not play in this game, and I think it was more precautionary. And then Mark Andrews also did not play in this game, which I also think was precautionary. We knew that this game meant a little bit more because the Bengals were AFC North champs, but we had to play this game in order to secure that home playoff game for sure and avoid a coin flip. We talked about why we're mad about that part of it last week, Cease, but this week it really did seem like the Ravens were sending out their second and third teamers to wear down this Bengals team on offense. Defense, the Ravens kept most of their starters in, but the reports of some chippiness, some plays through the whistle got out there. So what do you think, Cease?
Yeah, I mean, Bengals won this one handily. It's a third-string quarterback. The defense created a lot of turnovers, which is, a really good sign going into these playoffs that defense is playing well. And the offense, you can look at that. They're just playing conservative, I think, a lot of the game, especially once the second half turned around. Because, I mean, they're just not going to show you that much stuff in this game because they knew once the Ravens started benching starters, they went, we're not going to show them the whole playbook for them to study and tape and see the live reps because a lot of the defense was still out there. So the Ravens offense really was more sat down besides Marcus Peters, basically. But yeah, for what ensued in that game, though, it seemed like the Ravens, like you said, it just seems like there was a lot of chippiness and honestly a lot of unnecessary shots going on. There were a lot of Bengals players, a lot of receivers for the Bengals that were on the ground, medical staff for a minute or two because a Ravens player just absolutely destroyed them as a defensive receiver. And, some of the plays were but at a certain point, those plays just start to add up throughout the entire game, and you're starting to see up in here where it looks like the Ravens are literally just trying to hurt and wear down the Bengals. Now, between the push Jamar Chase when he put the ball in the end zone, Rickon Smith was a big proponent on all these plays. He was kind of one of the biggest culprits. There's definitely some chippiness because it felt like it was just open season for the Ravens to try to do whatever they could to the Bengals starters before the postseason even starts to really try to give them any chance of winning this game this week. But it didn't work. I don't think it's going to work going forward. But, yeah, there's definitely some plays that probably should have been called and some things that probably should have gotten looked at because there was some definitely not up to par sportsmanship going on by the Ravens in this one.
I would agree. I think they went into a gray area at the very least. And, I mean, the Bengals, you got to know that's coming. I mean, especially when they started announcing they're going to put their backups in. And It's an AFC North game, and that's just how it usually goes. But I think there's reason for optimism for the Bengals, right? Like the Ravens likely won't have Lamar this week, and we'll get into that later. But they played well enough in this game. They kind of, you could hear players saying stuff about keeping a lot of the playbook in hand, so they didn't show too much. So there's a lot to be positive about going into next week, even though you're playing the same team, the Ravens, next week at home. All right, we have the Buccaneers losing to the Falcons. The Falcons get their 7th win of the season, go 7-10. That was far better than we thought maybe they'd do this year. After they seemed like they were in rebuild mode. Buccaneers, again, they were already in the playoffs after beating the Panthers last week, so they just kind of played their starters for a little bit to get them some reps, make sure they're still fresh, and then they took them out of the game, which was a really smart decision. We'll get to some other coaches who weren't very smart, but for Todd Bowles, that was a really good decision. The Falcons, at this point, it's good to see Desmond Ridder get some snaps. I don't know if there's a better quarterback on the market for where they're picking or who they can get in free agency, but he at least shows you he has some potential to be a starter for at least next season to start the year.
Yeah, I mean, Desmond Ridder definitely showed some flashes in this game. Why some people thought he was one of the better QB prospects in this last draft cycle. And like you said, I mean, there's not much to take out of this game. Bucks played a couple series with their team, their starters, especially on offense, and then they sat them. Tampa Bay was winning basically up to that point as well. That's something to also take note of. So the Falcons were able to come, screaming back and win against the backups is really just not that much of a surprise by any means. So they played hard, 7 wins in a season where we thought they were absolutely horrible. And at times they looked that way. It's still a pretty good feat and, something to feel good about as you try to forward into the future.
Yeah, definitely. So that'll be a team to watch this offseason with Arthur Smith, with even like Kyle Pitts maybe not being used as much as he probably should be and all that. That'll be something to watch. Tyler Algier had a quiet 1,000-yard season too. There's a lot to be hopeful for Atlanta, especially if they hit on some picks. Buffalo Bills beat the New England Patriots 35-23. This was the better team winning. The Patriots kept it close, but in the end, the Bills were able to get the win. What we know this means now is that the Bills will play the Chiefs. If they play in the AFC Championship game, that will be in Atlanta because that is the neutral site decided by the NFL rule change. Again, we weren't very happy about it last week, but that is the result of it. Is the Bills winning this game means that they will play in Atlanta if they get to the AFC Championship against the Chiefs.
Yes, that is the repercussion of it. The Bills really put their hearts out there in this game. There was a lot of questions of what Bills team we were going to see. We were going to see one that was, really amped up and ready to play for their teammate, Damar Hamlin, or were we going to see some guys that were kind of, sleepwalking, not ready for, some real game collisions and things like that. Because, they just went through a very traumatic event less than a week ago. Luckily, it seems the former happened. They run the opening kickoff back for a touchdown. And they really, the offense executed at a pretty good level for most of the game. There were some drives where the Patriots, defense got to them, stalled out in the red zone on one drive right half. Some things that still need to be cleaned up by the offense for the Bills because the biggest thing seems to continue to be once they hit the red zone, they start to struggle a lot, which is weird considering you have Josh Allen's legs, but Josh Allen seems to be sometimes loses patience when the reality is if he would just sit back in the pocket or, take the chunk plays instead of trying to force it into the end zone, a lot of times it turns into a turnover. They'd be in a much better spot. And that's all they really need to fix on that offense is just on the red zone. And, they can very easily have.
Yeah. Again, I'm with you on the Bills' red zone. That needs to be improved, especially with Josh Allen. And they've gotten some more weapons, whether it's James Cook in the draft, who I know is not more of he's not a tough guy, but it opens up the fields for someone else. And Nyheim Hines too. Spread out the field, let Josh Allen run it in if you want someone who's kind of bigger. So, Bills get that 2 seed in the AFC. We'll get to their pick with the playoff game, but they likely have a pretty easy walk into the second round. The Vikings beat the Bears 29-13. We had a Nathan Peterman sighting in this one. He ended up getting benched at one point after they gave him the start. So that is the Nathan Peterman experience there. But the Vikings, again, another team that was pretty smart. They played their starters for about a half or so, and then they took them out. They knew there was not much to play for, and credit to them for making the smart decision and Cease, we might think that maybe they're not the best team for what the record says they are, but get to the playoffs at 13-4, and you get a chance. That's all you can really ask for.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, I mean, they took care of business in the regular season when it came to their schedule. I mean, they have 13 wins on the season, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a heck of an NFL season. A lot of teams would be begging to get even, 10, get a chance. All you really need at the end of the day is a chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a pretty good chance to get to host a home playoff game to begin. You never know if they win that. What works out with some of the other teams, however unlikely it is, they have seeding priority over all but two teams. So, I mean, there's a realistic, if they made the AFC Championship game, they might play it in their stadium. So, there's a lot of things for them to be happy about in the season. The problem is, a lot of it was streaky and, kind of a roll of the dice when they pull out these one-score victories. We've seen it year to year how many teams regress or progress based off of how many one-score games they won or lost the year before. The Chargers, the Bengals of the years past. There's been a lot of these kinds of teams that are close, and they either lose a lot of them or win a lot of them, and then, they regress back to the mean usually. The Vikings, it was great for them to beat up on the Bears in this one, but the same questions remain. They're a good team, but they're not great by any means, and they play opponents down to their level, and they seem to have to pull it out in the last minute. And, this is kind of a higher stage than Kirk Cousins has ever really performed on. And, expect kind of this to keep going is questionable. And two, all the teams they got blown out by, because they barely ever lost games. They would lose them by 20-some points. Those teams are all in the playoffs that they now have to play again. So you take that all into consideration. It's not a great outlook for the Vikings. Maybe they make it through this round. We'll get to our picks here in a minute, but I just don't see, unless they really turn around everything they've kind of shown us as a team this year so far, I really just don't think they're going to make it very far.
We will make our picks here soon, like you said. That see if the Vikings are, as we said earlier, maybe frauds, maybe not. That's going to be decided by our picks. It's the game that I'm kind of excited to talk about, almost more than any other. There's definitely some other ones, but the Texans and the Colts. The Texans win 32-31. They score a last-minute touchdown, and they decided to go for two and get the win. Now the Texans were in place to get the number one overall pick with the loss, but they go for two, and it was a stupid play, and somehow it works out, right? And they get the 2-point conversion. Now they move back in the draft order. After the game, they fire Lovie Smith, the second coach in 2 years that they have fired after one season. And I think at this point, the reports are coming out that Lovie kind of knew he was going to get fired. And he kind of stuck it to him, like, hey, we're going to win this game. We're going to go for two. And that's at least what it seems like the rumors are saying. And the reason why the Texans are probably firing Lovie Smith is because they wanted to hire last year. They wanted to hire Josh McCown, whose only real coaching experience was like high school at that point. And on the other sideline, we have Jeff Saturday, who was basically, he had no coaching experience besides high school. It's the most messed up organizations right now, in my opinion, in terms of what they're doing. So Josh McCown might be becoming the head coach of the Texans after not much coaching experience. We have Jeff Saturday now, who won one game as a head coach and is now possibly going to keep his job after having no coaching experience before this. This game is a total mystery to me about what the heck's going on, but it was definitely entertaining to watch and also entertaining to see how this all unfolds for the Texans and Colts.
Two of the most poorly run organizations in the NFL right now. And how badly they've been run over the last couple of years is starting to bring into question, because for the longest time we thought the Colts were a pretty good, well-run NFL franchise. And I think back then, I think Bill Polian had a much bigger and better control of what was going on with the organization, and kind of was able to keep Jim Irsay more at bay. Chris Ballard is not able to do that the same way as his current GM. And, he had Andrew Luck and Peyton Manning. And, those are, before that, the Colts were bad for years and years and years. So, I mean, you get a Hall of Fame quarterback, one of the top guys to ever do it, it's with your franchise for 15 years, and then you luck into the next prospect. You're going to look like a pretty good organization because winning is what everyone cares about. But since then, they've looked like an absolute dumpster fire as a front office. You got an owner who's just impulsive and doesn't really have the patience for building something the right way. Jeff Saturday, if he keeps his job, I will just sit there and laugh, and I will not pick the Colts for anything, and I will bet everything I can against the Colts for next year when Vegas odds come out. So they're a mess. And when it comes to the Texans, I mean, it's not that much of a surprise. I feel like I almost spoke into existence last week when we talked about, the amount of wins they had. How we thought maybe, Lovie Smith's probably not going to get fired. Thing last year with David Culley, he didn't really deserve to be fired, but they fired him anyway. And honestly, that roster was even worse. So, yeah, the Texans don't seem to understand what it takes to have a winning football team. They had those couple years where, Bill O'Brien, coached them to some decent playoff berths. Then they also had J.J. Watt during that time, Javen Clown. They had a really good stacked roster from all the years of being so bad. They got so many draft picks. So, well-run organizations, the testament is you can sustain success for more than the couple years that you have all the high round picks and you have all their low salary numbers. It's really a testament to other teams that can win and pay their guys a lot of top money and be successful. So both these teams are a dumpster fire. If that's true, and Lovie Smith just tried to stick it to the Texans, that's amazing. Good for him, and I can't wait to see both these guys competing for the top overall pick probably next year as well.
Very true. And mention the first overall pick, Cecil, as the results of the last two games we talked about. Texans now pick number 2, the Bears pick number 1. There's speculation that the Bears might take a quarterback. That's idiotic. They're going to trade to a team who needs a quarterback. They're going to keep Justin Fields. That was started by some ESPN analyst who was a former front office guy who's no longer a front office guy for a reason. So we'll move on. Those are the results of those two games. But see, it's the AFC East matchup, the Dolphins and Jets. Jets had nothing to play for in this game other than pride. And Joe Flacco's last game possibly as a quarterback. He hasn't announced a retirement, but it might be the last time we see him throwing the football around. But the Dolphins win 11-6. It was 9-6 basically, and then the last play kind of got bamboozled and was a safety, and that affected some bettors on this game. But the Dolphins with Skylar Thompson get the win. I mean, Teddy was out with the finger injury. Tua has the concussion protocol, which he's still not cleared for, and we'll talk about that pick in a little bit. The Dolphins defense really deserves credit here. I know the Jets offense isn't really great, but to win a game 11-6 in today's NFL, and basically 9-6 with the way things went, and the last play not really mattering, that's really impressive. That Mike McDaniel's going to keep his job now. That was a rumor last week. I don't think that was warranted at all to fire him, but you get in the playoffs, you get the right to get killed by Buffalo next week.
Yeah, I mean, the Dolphins, win a close one. It is a little concerning that, let's be honest, the score at the end of this game was 9-6 until a freak safety play that, like you said, I don't know if Vegas is happy about that or unhappy about it because pretty much everybody had 3 points one way or the other, Jets or Dolphins. And I think a lot of Jets fans are pretty upset at that outcome. But yeah, I mean, you got to be able to move the ball. I mean, scoring 3 field goals is not going to win you football games. I get the Jets defense is tough, but man, that offense just did not move at all without, Teddy Bridgewater or Tua in there. And at this point, it doesn't seem like either of those two are going to start this week, so we'll get to that as well. But I mean, they get a win, they get to make it into the playoffs, but anyone thinks that Mike McDaniel should be fired even if they lost this game is an absolute idiot, and just doesn't seem to. I mean, they just straight up don't know what they're talking about. I mean, we look at the Dolphins over the last couple of years. They played their hearts out, but they could never kind of get to those big wins and have a winning season. And then Mike McDaniels comes in and basically, obviously they get Tyreek Hill, they get some role players, but they transform this offense. Mm-hmm. The Tua's injury history came back up and these concussions happened. You can't fault Mike McDaniel for any of that. Me a handful of coaches in the NFL that I could say could still manage around having, their top quarterback getting hurt. Not just like a top quarterback. We're talking, a guy who was playing MVP level at the beginning of this season. So that's a lot to deal with as a head coach, and that's just something you can't really just say, oh, they really collapsed. It's like most teams would collapse if their top quarterback went down. I'm just telling you that straight up.
I'm with you. I think that's an interesting talk I had with someone about like why maybe some coaches stay in college instead of going to the pros. Is like in college you get a little bit more leeway and like people understand if you're in the NFL and your quarterback gets hurt, there's not many coaches who can win with that. Bill Belichick's one of the ones who have won with multiple quarterbacks, even though they probably shouldn't win with those guys. But that's tough. Like no one's going to win without their quarterback. I'm a big fan of Mike McDaniel still. I think he's going to have that job for a while, and we'll see whether Tua can come back next year. Maybe that'll have a huge impact. We'll talk about the Dolphins more in a little bit here, but for the Jets too, I think you have to be encouraged by this season. I know it's tough to not make the playoffs, but you're a quarterback away. Defense is really good. Garrett Wilson is a star at wide receiver. Like, go get that quarterback. Go sign someone in free agency. Go get Derek Carr or Lamar Jackson or even try to get someone in the draft. But you really are a quarterback away, in my opinion, from being a team that can win the AFC East at somewhat consistent level. So, I should rephrase. Not win the AFC East, make the playoffs. The Bills are still there. All right, the NFC South. The Panthers beat the Saints in a game that meant nothing. We saw Andy Dalton possibly for the last time starting a game for at least being the starting quarterback for most of the season. Alvin Kamara had a good game, 107 yards. Honestly, this game meant nothing to both teams. The Panthers, now we'll see if they keep Steve Wilkes as their head coach. We'll see if Sam Darnold is going to be the quarterback next year because they won themselves too many games and now can't draft one of the top young quarterbacks. And the Saints, maybe Sean Payton's coming back. That seems to be a rumor floating around there, Cease. But otherwise, the actual game was no one really cares about this one.
Right. It's a meaningless game at the end of the season, two teams out of it. It's a feel-good story for Steve Wilkes to kind of show what he can do in the NFL after wrongly fired in Arizona, which we'll get to in a minute. The Saints, you lose, once in a generation head coach. He's probably the best coach in his generation. Bill Belichick is really the generation before. If you could give me a coach in that kind of group right there that came up with Sean Payton, who's better? Sean Payton was that guy with the Saints, with Drew Brees, and then they really created something that no one else could have probably duplicated. So I think the Saints would love to have him back, 100%. I don't know if Sean Payton really wants to deal with that. I think that was a big reason why he quit in the first place is because of all the issues with the cap and the quarterback, and his heart just wasn't in it anymore. So I'll believe the rumors when I kind of see something more concrete. But I think the reality is he really just wants to coach somewhere else. Probably, I think it's just he feels like it's his time to leave New Orleans. It doesn't it would just be a weird situation to put him in there. It's just weird back and forth with the players, just like you just left, you left. Mm-hmm. And now you're back. I just don't think that's a great vibe. I think the Saints organization, I'd be happy to have Sean Payton back too, but I just don't think that works out that well for the locker room and for him personally. So,
yeah,
should be the coach of the Panthers next year. You give him a full season.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I didn't mean to cut you off there. We had a little bit of lag. But, Steve Wilkes should be the coach of the Panthers. He's also a Carolina guy, which I think should – if he's doing a good job with his roster that Matt Rule couldn't do anything with, and Carolina guy should keep him on there. And for Sean Payton, he is interviewing already with the Broncos. Broncos were the first team to be able to interview him head on, and maybe that's a fit there. Maybe he can fix Russell Wilson. I don't know, but I'm with you. I think he's looking for a different opportunity. I think the Saints have kind of gotten into that cap hell we've talked about, and maybe just trying to find a quarterback while having a solid roster when you're not good enough to actually win anything, but it's just middle ground is not going to be the good spot to be in. I think he's going to go somewhere else now that he's kind of stepped away from the job. The other AFC North matchup, the Steelers beat the Browns 28-14. With the results of the weekend, the Dolphins get the last AFC playoff spot. The Steelers had a slim chance to get it if the Patriots and the Dolphins lost. But they finished 9-8. I think, if you're the Steelers with TJ Watt being out, and having a new quarterback come in and an offensive line that wasn't projected to be that good season actually played well. That's pretty good for the Steelers and the Browns. You got to be wondering about that Deshaun Watson trade now. It did not look good at the end of the season when he was able to come back, and you gave up all those picks for him. You don't have the ability to build that roster around him. Jadeveon Clowney, who hasn't been the greatest player for him, but is still a pretty good pass rusher. says he's not going to be back next year. I mean, it's looking pretty dicey in Cleveland. But I look at this game as like two different things. Like the Browns should be like kind of worried about things, and the Steelers should be kind of happy with their progress this year.
Right. I mean, the Steelers, nobody thought they were going to be this good this year. They had some close wins, like, the first week of the season against the Bengals. A really well coached team with Mike Tomlin. It burns me up inside to see the Steelers be successful. It seems like no matter what they do, but I mean, hats off to them. The reality now is I just don't see this team getting that much better, if that makes sense. I mean, I think they're always going to be in kind of this at max 10 wins unless Kenny Pickett suddenly becomes a completely different quarterback. I think this is kind of where they're going to be. They're a well-coached team. They have good role players on defense. They have a little cap space to build around because they don't have to pay a quarterback right now. But ultimately, I feel like this is just like the ceiling as long as Kenny Pickett's the quarterback, honestly. We're pretty close to it. I mean, maybe they pull off a season where they win the AFC North, and they get 11 wins or 10 wins and they win all the right matchups. But I think, they grew quickly. But I think, it's just not that much potential in this team the way the roster is going to be currently constructed. You look on the flip side here, we're talking about a Browns team who completely disappointed. Honestly, better with Jacoby Brissett. It's really was that simple. They can't go back to that. They've already opened Pandora's box and paid Deshaun Watson money no one else would pay him. It's guaranteed. They can't get out of it. They can't cut him at any point. They're just stuck with him for the next 4 years. If he doesn't start playing better, I mean, they're screwed. That's just the answer. They're going to be in literal, mediocrity and quarterback hell because they can't move on. Now, will he play better next year? I think so. To a certain point, I think it looks more like the Deshaun we saw with the Texans because this version of him is much worse. But give him a whole offseason to practice and formulate the guys. Maybe they get him another weapon. I think he'll play better, but still, I just don't think this team, especially the way they're all kind of very upset right now, is going to be a good building block for the future. I just don't think Deshaun can take him to the promised land past maybe, a wild card at best.
Yeah, I think you're looking at two teams, Cease, who really hope Lamar Jackson leaves in free agency this offseason because both these teams have some talent. I'm more concerned about the Browns for the future with what they've given up. But if you take the Ravens out of the equation, that helps these two teams. One won 7-10, the other one went 9-8, and they're like right there on the cusp of the playoffs almost. If a couple of results go their way, but when you have a team like the Ravens there with Lamar Jackson, that's not going to be easy with the Ravens and Bengals. So that's what they're going to be hoping for is Lamar goes somewhere else. And if Lamar does go somewhere else, then maybe the Steelers are that second team in the AFC North who makes the playoffs most years, and maybe the Browns aren't in the cellar. I don't know. That's probably the best they can hope for at this rate. All right, we'll go to the AFC West, a game that meant nothing because the Chargers already had the 5th seed locked up, but they played their starters well into the 4th quarter. The Broncos win 31-28. That's cool. Russell Wilson played okay, I guess. But Cease, I got a real bone to pick here. Brandon Staley is he started off really hot last year, and people liked his ability to go for it on 4th down, to believe in his team, and then he kind of flip-flopped this year. And now you are the head coach of the team that arguably has the worst injury luck in the history of the NFL when you get a good team. And something always happens to the Chargers. It doesn't matter what happens. You already know you have the 5th spot in the playoffs. And yeah, sure, if you want to play him for a half or even a couple series, cool. But he played them almost the entire game. And now Mike Williams is hurt, and he's going to play, I think, this week. Joey Bosa left the game with an injury. What are you doing? That was the dumbest. The Broncos win, that's cool, but that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. I mean, we knew it was, 4 o'clock. Ravens game ended in 1. They knew they literally had locked in the 5th seed. There was nothing to play for. So, if anything, do kind of the Ravens route where you hold out guys that have been hurt. Mike Williams hurt his ankle pretty bad for a while there. Keenan Allen was hurt for most of the season. Joey Bosa has horrible injury history of getting hurt all the time. If you don't have to bench everybody, put Justin Herbert in there to get a rhythm for a couple series or even a half. But anyone who's been hurt throughout this year or something like that, just take them out. Just take them out. You don't want to be in this predicament because you're basically it's a no-win situation for you. Because best case, they get into a rhythm, I guess, and there's really no benefit. The fans really aren't going to care. Or the opposite is this happens, and everybody on earth starts second guessing you and saying that you don't know how to run your football team. I mean, let's be honest. If this game comes down to Jacksonville's passing game doesn't get going because Mike Williams isn't 100%, you know, I don't know what happens to Brandon Staley, honestly. I think he keeps his job, but I think that seat gets a lot hotter because, he's playing with fire and he's just made some questionable things happen. And honestly, there are a lot of coaches I feel like could take this right now and get a better result out of it, honestly. And I don't think he's a bad coach. I just think he just, in the key moments, and honestly, that's the most important thing, he has made the wrong decision throughout this season.
I'm with you, and this is the franchise that fired Marty Schottenheimer after going 14-2. They do not care. They'll fire you. They don't care. So I do think that's something to note, and I do think it's something to note too. They're playing the Jaguars this week. They already lost by 30 at home to them the first time they played each other. Go rest your guy. There's nothing to be gained from this. Go, especially we saw how the injuries to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams specifically has impacted them. You need to bench these guys, man. If they're out, you got no hope. If you keep Herbert in or keep even Eckler in to get some mojo going for next week, cool. But it really bothered me that he played them for that long. And knowing the team you're coaching too, it's the Chargers, man. You always have injuries. That's just what happens. So I just did not like that. The Commanders beat the Cowboys 26-6. Cowboys really laid a dud in this one. Dak Prescott played really bad. The Cowboys defense played kind of okay at times, but most of the time not too good. The Commanders have to feel good about Sam Howell. He was picked in the 5th round, I believe, by them this past draft. A lot of people had him going higher. And that was, a lot of people thought maybe he should have started for a lot of the year, and maybe he should have, or at least Taylor Heinicke shouldn't have been benched for Carson Wentz. But Sam Howell had some pretty good reps in the preseason, and he showed maybe he's a guy who can compete for the job next year if Washington strikes out with some of these big-name free agents. And the Cowboys, it is very, very concerning that they lose this game, and they look so bad doing it. They played their starters for a long time as well. They did pull them, I believe, in the 3rd quarter, and it was a little bit earlier than the Chargers. So I give them a little bit of a pass, and I was honestly thinking that they were just kind of like, all right, we'll just get 1 touchdown, and then we'll pull them. Or we'll keep it a little bit closer, and then we'll pull them. And it never happened. It was not a smart decision by Mike McCarthy either. The good news for the Cowboys is they usually bounce back well from a loss. At least this season they have, but it was a bad performance, Cease.
Yeah, they basically got their ass kicked by Sam Howell. Let's just put it as it was for most of the game. The Cowboys were favored by 7 points in this game. Now, maybe that was an overcorrect. People didn't know how long the Cowboys were going to, actually play their starters. But come on. They get double-digit loss in this game. You just can't have that. You're playing a rivalry game. You got to take that into factor when, you go out there and decide you're going to play your starters in this game. And come out to play because, the Commanders are going to sit there and want to put one on the Cowboys. And they're, they just got eliminated from the playoffs and they want to show that, they can play with the big dogs and get some momentum for next year. Cowboys just straight up laid down the whole time. They couldn't get anything going on offense at all. And the defense really – pass defense, which has been kind of the more vaunted part, with that pass rush and everything, just didn't get there in this game. And, Sam Howell was making passes all over the yard that most quarterbacks haven't been able to make in the NFL all year against this team. So I don't like how streaky they are right now. I'm hoping it's just a sort of they were looking towards next week, and everyone's been thinking about next week. Obviously, this is a big game for them going up against Tom. But man, at a certain point, I don't know. They probably should have just pulled the plug on this within a series or two after they realized it wasn't working out. Because what they ended up doing was wear their starters down and just basically demoralize them as they got beat up by a 5th-round rookie QB.
Yeah, I'm with you. And there was something to play for here. The Cowboys did have a chance at the number 1 seed. They did have a chance at the NFC East title as well. But the chances of that happening were pretty slim, right? They needed the Eagles to lose to the Giants backups. We'll recap that game in here in a second. And they needed the 49ers to lose to the Cardinals. And I don't think either one was really realistic. So, yeah, maybe play the starters for a half and see how things are going. And they would have seen that, the Eagles are I mean they're not winning by a wide margin, but they're handling business, and the Cardinals have no shot against the 49ers. So that's what they probably should have done, and it just sucks that it didn't work out. At least to get some touchdowns or some momentum, and again, you got to hope that they can bounce back like they have from every loss they have this season. They've gone on a at least 2-game win streak every single time they've lost a game. So let's see if they can bounce back and beat the Buccaneers when they've never beat Tom Brady. The Eagles beat the Giants backups, as I just mentioned. They win 22-16. They were up by like 16-0 at half, and the Giants kind of crept back in. The Giants had their seating locked up, so they decided to rest their starters. I totally get that. And the Eagles, they get the 1 seed now, which is important for them, Cease, because they brought Jalen Hurts back to this game. He did not have his best game, and they also just have guys like Lane Johnson on the offensive line. They need to get healthy. It's cool that they won this game. It's cool they got the number 1 seed. But more so than even getting the bye, it's just that the guys just have to get healthy.
Right. This is one of those 1 seeds where it's absolutely imperative that they get that extra day of rest, that extra week, I should say, because they do have so much hurt. I mean, Lane Johnson getting a full week of rest is going to help them a lot. Jalen Hurts is still just coming off an injury. They've got a lot of guys who are banged up, on both sides of the line there. So, I mean, they did what they did. They took care of business in this game. That wasn't that hard to do. I like they kept the starters in for most of the game just because, I mean, get Jalen Hurts in his offensive reps after being off for 2 weeks and have his first live action be a playoff game against, probably a pretty tough opponent. So I agree with what the Eagles did. I think they did a good job of it. And I mean, the Giants, they played well. Ultimately, they played way better with their backups than anyone thought. So good for them in that aspect. And both these teams will be in the playoffs.
Absolutely. We'll pick their games later on. Cease, one we probably don't need to recap too much. The 49ers beat the Cardinals 38-13. That was David Blau at quarterback, and J.J. Watt's last game for the Cardinals. Really good career for him. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. We know that. And Cease, I would like to congratulate us as well. We were one of the first people out there who said the Cardinals were just a really bad team. We said they were down there with some of the worst teams in the league, and they finished there. They're going to have the 4th overall pick, and they have a huge rebuild to do. Cliff Kingsbury's gone. The general manager has kind of stepped away because of health reasons. So they got to figure things out. They're not going to have Kyler Murray for next year at all either. So props to us for calling this out from the start, but also for Cardinals, they got a lot of work to do to get back to being a team who made the playoffs even just last year.
They absolutely do. I mean, we're talking a full organizational rebuild here. They pretty much said Steve Keim is not coming back as GM. It's pretty much what's rumored and almost semi-announced. Mm-hmm. Cliff Kingsbury is gone. Probably the best decision the Cardinals could have made there. Whatever the hell they were trying to run the last 2 years as an offense is just straight up not working. And, I mean, it's just a poorly coached football team. They're kind of married to Kyler Murray with the contract they just he's like you said, he's not going to play for probably a good chunk of next season as well because of that, ligament injury in his knee. And, I mean, we don't know where this Cardinals team's going to go from here. They were a team that was, signed J.J. Watt because they were in win-now mode. They got embarrassed in the playoffs last year, and then, they completely fell off. Just like we predicted, completely. Honestly, I wish I had put money on this one. I don't know why I didn't. I had a lot of people arguing with me throughout the offseason that the Cardinals were better than the 49ers were. I'm just going to take this shameless plug, too, since we didn't talk much about the 49ers, before this season. There were some doubters out there, but yeah, I think this game kind of summed up everything that I told everyone the entire offseason. So I'm just going to take this moment to say I was right. We were right. Cardinals suck. 49ers are really good. Let's see if Big Cock Brock can win a Super Bowl.
Oh, boy. They have a pretty good chance, according to the odds makers. We'll see what happens. And, yeah, excited to see what the Cardinals are going to do with this head coaching job with these picks that are high. I mean, they still have some talent on the roster, but, I was asked about why did J.J. Watt retire this past week. So I'll address it real quick. He's on the Cardinals, and the Cardinals stink. And also he's had how many injuries and also that health issue this year where his heart stopped beating or on pace or whatever. So that's why J.J. Watt's retiring. But hopefully the Cardinals can rebound, and hopefully the 49ers can keep up this momentum, man. 38-13 against anyone, still impressive. All right, the Seahawks needed to win and they needed some help to get in the playoffs. Spoiler alert, they did win and they did get help to make the playoffs. They won 19-16 over the Rams in overtime. Geno Smith, he didn't have his cleanest game, 213 yards and a touchdown. He threw an interception at the end of regulation. But what do you know? The Seahawks were able to get a field goal to win the game in overtime. It was not the greatest game. It wasn't the most well-played game. The Seahawks have kind of struggled down the stretch, as we've talked about the last several weeks, but got to feel good for the expectations of this team coming into the year being one of the bottom-tier teams to making the playoffs, even if it is the last seed in the NFC. That's really cool.
No, that's huge, honestly. I mean, for them, you just like you see the Rams, what happened, and kind of were there at the low point at the bye week of this year, midway point, and Baker Mayfield, you know, saved their franchise a little bit, in its current construction by kind of giving them something they're looking at, and made Matthew Stafford isn't healthy. Baker Mayfield, they keep there and kind of groom him towards the future. I don't know what that looks like ultimately. Hopefully they can keep Sean McVay as well, because there's rumors about him leaving to go into TV. But yeah, the Seahawks, I mean, talk about two teams that had pretty much had opposite trajectories before the season and now are sitting in each other's chairs. I mean, the Seahawks, like you said, we didn't expect anything from. Geno Smith was a journeyman quarterback who we thought was an obvious downgrade to Russell Wilson, and that's been proven completely false. And played way better than expected, and they're young. The running back tandem that Pete Carroll loves running between Rashad Penny this year, between obviously Kenneth Walker in the second half after he got hurt, has been great. It's a great feel good story. This year's 2-7 seeds. You talk about the NFL when they expand the playoffs. You talk about the college football playoff expanding and all that. Did we really need a at this rate? Because I think it's starting to clearly show that I don't know if it's really worth getting this extra team in. The 14 have more to play for, but the last 2 years we've seen the 7 seeds come in and they just really have not been all that so far. Maybe we'll be wrong come this wild card weekend. We'll get to our picks, but I don't have that much faith in it.
I don't either, Cease. I think this is more of a sign that the league might be open to expanding more, maybe a London franchise or something, and they get the playoff structure going so they have 7 teams in each conference, and then when they add 2 teams to make it 34 or 4 teams make it 36 teams, that they can still keep that, kind of test these waters out with the playoffs and everything. So that's my gut feeling, but I'm with you. These 7 seeds going to have a rough time this week, so we'll see. The last game of the regular season was the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Before the kickoff, we knew that the Lions were eliminated. The only thing they had to play for was pride and Cease. I don't know if that made them more dangerous or not. Like, honestly, I think it may have made them play harder. But the Lions win in Lambeau. They win 20-16. The Packers start off hot. They kind of fade down the stretch. Aaron Rodgers was able to connect with Christian Watson a lot. The minor storyline in this game, I'll say minor because the big storyline is the Packers didn't make the playoffs, was that Quay Walker gets ejected for pushing a trainer. Very not coherent thing to do. The Lions trainer's coming to help a player and he pushes them and then gets ejected for it. Especially we've seen how much athletic trainers do for their players this week, especially with DeMar Hamlin. And he gets ejected. It's not the first dumb penalty he's had all year. He is a rookie, but he got ejected, and that cost his team. But the Lions played good football. Dan Campbell did a really good job with this team, and they're one Seahawks loss away from making the playoffs, or even one flip of the coin from a different game going their way to help get into the playoffs. And Dan Campbell, like we were talking 5 weeks into the season, of like this might be the last year. So lots of props to Dan Campbell and the Lions, and for the Packers. A lot of things to figure out in your future. Allen Lazard's already said he's gone. Aaron Rodgers might retire. You still have some things to fix on that defense. It's not like it used to be. Like, it's not like Aaron Rodgers can come back and they can win the Super Bowl. It might be Aaron Rodgers comes back and they go 9-8 or 8-9, and that's just how things are right now.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to the Lions for really saving their season, and really Dan Campbell building a team from the ground up that has truly the grit he talked about, throughout the last 2 seasons. They showed that a lot in this, in this season. They showed that a lot in this game. They're just playing for pride at the end of the day and respect because if any, what the Lions really haven't gotten much of, and rightfully so over the last, couple of decades of just bad football, on and off. They've made the playoffs, I think, once in, over 30 years now. And it's just not a good look for a franchise. But it's good to see winning football in Detroit. They have a winning season. Jamal Williams sets the single season touchdown record for the Lions. Barry Sanders is 16, which I can't believe it's that low, especially with Barry Sanders. But hats off to him. And I mean, you like the identity of this team. I mean, they're fun to watch. It seems like if you watch Hard Knocks, it's truly a tight knit team, and that's something. Honestly, Jared Goff looked pretty good at times. I mean, this NFC North could look very different, in the next couple of years. Aaron Rodgers, like I said, is going to retire. We don't know if he comes back. Going to be that much better. Can't say. Are the Vikings going to be able to repeat what they're doing right now over and over? I don't think so. And we got the Bears and Justin Fields where they could be a lot better. They have the first overall pick. They could get better in a hurry. So I think the Lions really have a shot to be in a good spot in this division for a while. They're going to have a high draft pick, and ultimately it's a bright future for them. When it comes to the Packers, I mean, what are you getting with Aaron Rodgers at this point? I mean, I understand he's a Hall of Fame quarterback. I think he's very good. He's definitely better than Jordan Love. But we're getting to that point where, I mean, the guy's getting paid, over $40 million, $50 million a year to play quarterback. And, his last offseason was just a wild ride of him, Iowa. It's just as many buzzwords you can think of, how many distractions you can think of. The guy doesn't work out with the receivers in the offseason, so they even signed another weapon. Are they going to build him rapport before training camp, or is it going to be just like last year where half the season they're trying to figure out, who the weapons are and who he can trust to throw the football to? It's just that kind of question. It's like if Aaron Rodgers really wants to do this right and really try to come back and try to win a Super Bowl, he's got to dedicate his entire offseason to that point too. You can't have this distraction stuff that he's been doing because ultimately that's kind of what he's becoming to this Packers team is a distraction. And I get he's a great quarterback and, lots of teams would be lucky to have him, but at a certain point, it's not worth the trouble for a guy that you can't really commit to long term.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and there's just a lot of decisions to be made by the Packers too. I know the Cardinals, I said that for them too, but the Packers, you got to make up your mind whether you want Aaron Rodgers to be there, whether you want to move over to Jordan Love, whether Jordan Love is good enough to be that guy, whether you need to rebuild the roster if Jordan Love is starting, because you're not going to do that if Aaron Rodgers is in the game. There's so much to be decided this offseason with the Packers. They were not going to win a title this year. They got to think about what the best path is, whether it's trying to give Aaron Rodgers another shot or trying to rebuild now and try to win in a couple of years, because it's not totally clear right now. All right, we'll move on to the playoff seats, the wild card round. We have 6 games to watch this weekend. It should be fun football. We're going to start off with Saturday games. There is the Seahawks and 49ers to kick things off at 4:30 Eastern. The 49ers are at home and favored by 10 points.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Niners to win and cover in this one. I mean, the Niners have beaten the Seahawks pretty handily both times, this season that they've played them. I think the Seahawks team is played as well as they can. Like, we know their limitations at this point. We know what Geno Smith can and can't do, what Kenneth Walker can do. I just think that defense is going to smother them a lot. Kenneth Walker's not going to get much on the ground, and it's going to force the ball in Geno Smith's hand. And I just don't think that that's going to be enough to really compete in this game. 10 points is a lot for a playoff game, but I feel like we're right at that mark where, I think the 49ers could easily, win this one by 2 touchdowns. I mean, they're just that good of a football team right now.
They are. I'm going 49ers to win, but Seahawks with the points. I think the last time these two teams played, the 49ers won by 8. That was on the road. This one will be at home, but I do think that this is a very, very good roster. But we need to see Brock Purdy in these big pressure moments. He's played, obviously, a couple games now. He's played well. this will be the first experience with playoff football. I think that maybe he starts off slow. They come back because they do have a lot of talent. They win. I think they win by a touchdown or so and move on to the next round as one of the favorites in the NFC. All right, the AFC playoff game. I mentioned this earlier. These two teams played earlier in the season, but the Chargers at the Jaguars. Chargers favored by 1.5 on the road. Remember, the last time these two teams played, Jaguars blew out the Chargers on the road.
They did. That game was right after the rib injury to Justin Herbert as well. So I think that's a big thing to consider in this. I'm picking the Chargers to win and cover, especially in sport. Yeah, that small spread is road favorites. I like the talent on the Chargers roster. I think they're going to be more ready for this. I can't really explain why. I just think, the Chargers are the team that I think is just more talented on defense and offense than the Jaguars are. I think the Jaguars just kind of came off a very emotional win. And I think they're a team that has played better throughout the stretch, but I don't think there's any guarantee that that's going to continue into the playoffs. It's a very different territory for them. The defense still has a lot of problems, honestly, and I could see Justin Herbert just winning this in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I'm going Chargers to win and cover too. I like the talent on the roster better. I again don't like what Brandon Staley did last week. I know that some players might be a little bit banged up, but they seem, for the Chargers at least, relatively healthy, especially getting Rashawn Slater back. I don't think this game, but he's at least opened the window to get him back for the playoffs. I think Justin Herbert's a star. I think if he has his wide receivers going, I think the offense will be too much for the Jaguars to keep up with, even though Trevor Lawrence has been incredible. All right, on to Sunday. We have the Dolphins and Bills to kick things off. We mentioned Tua's out for this game, and Teddy Bridgewater's out for this game, so that means Skylar Thompson will be starting for the Dolphins in the playoffs. That's why the Bills are favored by 13 points. Cease, I'll let you make this easy one.
Yeah, Bills to win and cover. I mean, we just saw what the Dolphins offense could do with Skylar Thompson against the Jets. I mean, they're going to have no favors with the Bills up in Buffalo, and the Bills are going to just rout them. It's just that simple. I mean, I think it's easily going to be by 14-plus points. It might be, honestly, 3 touchdowns at this rate.
I had the same pick. Earlier in the week, I made my picks on thegamehouse.com based on thinking Tua would play. That was like Dolphins to cover 11 points. I'm thinking, you know what, that if he plays, they played him really close, and they had the game pretty much almost won in Buffalo. Without Tua, it is not going to be so friendly. The Bills have a much better team. I see it hard for the Dolphins to get their playmakers like Tyreek Hill involved. That's the big thing, that they have this Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. They both really, really good receivers. That is a weapon they can use, and I don't think they're going to be able to use that as much. So I'm going the Bills win and cover. Just don't think the Dolphins will be able to keep up. All right, so it's the Giants and Vikings. These two teams played a couple weeks ago. We'll get to that in a second. The Vikings are at home. They are favored by 3. And the last time they played, I believe the Vikings won by 3 at home as well. So this is a line that's just sticking with what the first score was.
I think this game will play out pretty similar to that, but ultimately, I'm going to pick the Vikings to win and cover here. I think it's just one of those things where is Saquon Barkley and Danny Jones' rushing ability, are they going to take? I mean, that's really their only path to success in this. The Vikings, have a good running game. They have a good offense. It's just their defense is a problem, and I think Justin Jefferson could really just turn it on in this game. And I don't think they're going to win by a lot. It's going to be close, but I mean, if you're basically saying they're going to win by a field goal or it's a push, I'm going to take that risk there. I think it'll be close, like all Vikings games seem to be this year. But I just think they have more talent and they have the ability to pass. Where the Giants get down in this game, they just don't have any receiving weapons that I think are going to be really that good.
I'm going Vikings to win and cover. I think they have a better team, and Brian Daboll's done a really good job getting the most out of his talent. But I do think the Vikings' offensive weapons will shine through. I think Justin Jefferson will have a really big day after he had an incredible season. It's also not a primetime game. It's 4:30. That does scare me a little bit with Kirk Cousins, but it's not primetime. So I think, for at least this week, I think I can trust the Vikings to win and cover. All right, Sunday night game, we have the rematch of the Week 18 game Cease. We have the Bengals and Ravens. Bengals will be at home for this one. They are favored by 9.5 points. Lamar Jackson is reported that he has an uphill battle to play. He has not practiced all week. Tyler Huntley's been limited in practice. It looks like he's going to start this game, and if they don't have him, they'll have third stringer Anthony Brown there to step in, who played Week 18. Cease.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Bengals win and cover here. I'm assuming Lamar Jackson not going to play. Lamar's going to play. I'm much more hesitant about an over touchdown line. That's a lot to throw in there. But ultimately, I mean, if it's I don't care if it's Tyler Huntley or Anthony Brown. I think the Bengals is upset after last week. I know they've had the right tackle and right guard go down, but luckily they've had decent backups at both spots they're able to fill in. And I think the Bengals are going to open up their playbook a lot more in this game. And I think honestly they're pretty pissed after what happened last week. It seems like the new Bengals trend is whatever happens the week before is just going to fuel them into this week. And I think they're not happy with the way the Ravens played that game last week. And they were basically just trying not to show their hands, and that's what the Ravens wanted them to do. So ultimately, I think they're just going to come out and try to win by a lot. And I mean, if you take a look at last week's game, I know there were a lot of turnovers that helped the Bengals, but there were also a lot of offensive plays that were just a little out of sync. Missed deep threats, by fingertips, drop, that are deep. There's no guarantee they're going to drop all those again either. So I think this is going to be a much better game for the Bengals. I think they win by 10 points.
I do too. In addition to what you said, Cease, Joe Burrow did not look like he was hitting his throws. There was a lot of throws he just kind of missed that he usually doesn't. I don't expect that to happen 2 weeks in a row. I'm going Bengals to win and cover just because of that reason. And as you said, opening the playbook will help. I think T. Higgins said in a press conference, we really didn't call too many plays in this game. It's nice to get Tyler Huntley over Anthony Brown, but if you don't have Lamar, that really hinges your offense. And I think if they had Lamar, the line would still be in favor of the Bengals by about 4.5, maybe 5.5. But I think the Bengals win and cover this week. All right, we've added Monday Night Football in the playoffs the last year, and then this year we have the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are doing this because this will get some of the best ratings ever, because whenever the Cowboys are on, they do well. Whenever Tom Brady is on, he does well. And whenever these two teams play each other, Tom Brady versus the Cowboys at least, the ratings are off the charts. That's why it's the Monday night game. The Cowboys will go to Tampa Bay, and they will be favored by 2.5 points. But Cease, the Cowboys looked bad last week, and Tom Brady has never lost to the Cowboys in his career. Where are you going with this one?
I'm betting against history here. I'm saying the Cowboys win and cover the small spread. That being said, I get it. I get, pretty much ever because I just don't trust them. But, I mean, they should win this game. They really should. I mean, this Cowboys team that's been out there this year is much better than the ones I've seen in the past years that have made the playoffs. I think, they're very much more – they had the playoff experience from last year. They know what happened. I think they're ready to try to prove some people wrong. And if anything, it's not as much about the Cowboys. It's about this Bucs team that's very wildly inconsistent right now. The defense is up and down. The offense can't move the ball half the time. And I think everyone's just – that's betting on the Bucs here are really hoping that the Cowboys have another huge gaffe in the playoffs and that Tom Brady's team and walks back out like it's 5 to 10 years ago. Those things happen. I'd pick Tom Brady and the Bucs, but ultimately, we're dealing with a Tom Brady that we don't know. This could be his last game, last season. We don't know. We're going to go through the song and dance probably for another 5 years. I just think they're going to get after him, and that's what Tom Brady can't do very well is when they get pressure on him, he struggles, and that offensive line is pretty makeshift at this point. So I think Micah Parsons is going to have a pretty good game, and I think the Cowboys offense will be able to take care of business good enough in this one.
Yeah, I'm going Cowboys to win and cover 2. It's almost like they can't play as bad as they did last past week. I mean, it was just that bad. Maybe the time before that they played this bad was against the Buccaneers. But these are two different teams from week 1 when the Buccaneers won 19-3, I believe. The Cowboys, I think, their offense at times has been elite. Their defense at times has been elite. They can win the whole thing if they get both of those going at the same time. They just haven't done it. And with the history of the playoffs and the history against Tom Brady, makes me think they're going to lose first round. But based on what we've seen this year, for the totality of the year, Cease, I think the Cowboys should win and cover. I think they should win by maybe a touchdown. Um, I'm fully prepared for the Cowboys to lose first round. That's just how it goes. But on paper, on everything we've seen, on tape even, it's Cowboys. So Cowboys win and cover. All right, any final thoughts for the week, Cease?
Yeah, if they don't win this game, McCarthy should. If my final thought is this: if the Cowboys don't win this game, McCarthy should probably get fired. That's where I'm at. I mean, I get they had another great season, but that's 2 playoffs in a row. They just got beat by a team to win against.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That's it.
I'm with you. I think Sean Payton might be the coach of the Cowboys next year if that happens. So honestly, this I'm sure the last week scared off Vegas too. This line's 2.5, and the way these two teams will play this year, it should be bigger. But again, I don't know. All right, so my final thought, Cease, just reminding everyone to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you're getting it to, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. We thank everyone for listening. Hopefully you like the new look of the of our layout this week. We have a little new layout with our logo and everything. Always striving to get better at everything, but we are going to enjoy this week of NFL playoff games. We'll be back next week to recap these games, and then we'll preview the divisional round of the playoffs the week after that. Cecil, it's been great. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week.
See you guys.